Residency training, the specialty training that one does after medical school and is dramatized on TV in shows like Grey's Anatomy and Scrubs, is nothing short of arduous. Long hours, quantum leaps in responsibility for patient lives, the constant adaptation to new systems of care, often on a monthly basis, and very little time to tend to family, friends, or the activities that sustain personal well-being. It's no surprise then that burnout, imposter syndrome, moral injury, and mental illness are rampant among medical trainees. Addressing these issues is complex. Traditional approaches such as employee assistance programs or individual coaching require numerous counselors or coaches, and there's a common misconception that these services lack anonymity, which makes them often underutilized. In this episode, we explore an innovative group coaching approach designed to tackle these challenges. There are times in our lives that change the way we see the world. Navigating these challenges can take insight, trusted confidants, or even a coach. Let's explore those moments. In this companion podcast to RX for Success, we will discover ways to learn and write our own success stories together. I'm Dr. Dale Waxman, a physician coach with MD Coaches, and this is Life-Changing Moments. My guests today are Dr. Tyra Fainstad and Dr. Adrian Mann, both associate professors of medicine at the University of Colorado. Dr. Fainstad is a primary care physician and resident clinic director with a focus on learner-centered feedback and creating psychologically safe educational environments. Dr. Mann is a hospitalist and core faculty member for coaching at the internal medicine residency program at the University of Colorado, specializing in the development and application of coaching methodologies to promote resilience and well-being. Together, they co-direct Better Together Physician Coaching, a fully digital 4-month group coaching program tailored to the unique needs of resident physicians. As we'll hear, participants who go through the program's self-paced teaching materials, live virtual coaching calls, and anonymous written coaching are more likely to have significant reductions in burnout, imposter syndrome, and moral injury, along with improvements in self-compassion and overall flourishing. I think their work is truly groundbreaking in the space of physician well-being. They're not just improving the lives of medical trainees, they're setting a new standard for medical training. So welcome to Life-Changing Moments, Dr. Adrian Mann and Dr. Tyra Fainstad.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. I'm Adrian Mann. I'm an associate professor of medicine at the University of Colorado. Clinically, I'm a hospitalist at the VA hospital here in Denver, and I co-direct Better Together with Dr. Fainstad, who's here with us today as well.
Great.
Yeah, hi. I'm Tyra Fainstad, also associate professor of medicine. I'm a primary care doctor. I work in the outpatient clinic and oversee curriculum for the residents there, and also co-direct Better Together.
I'm very excited about this. As I shared with you before we started recording, I feel like I'm talking to some rock stars who have in some ways cracked the code about some of the challenges that many of us in education have had around how do we help improve fulfillment and well-being in our resident workforce. And you two have done some really amazing work. And I know you have a team behind you as well, but I know that you lead that, and it's been very impressive. And so we'll hear a little bit more about your journey towards offering some pretty cool stuff around resident well-being. I'd like to start, though, with your own journey. What got you, perhaps your own story about how you got interested in this, bringing this kind of, where did your energy come from for this kind of work? Dr. Fainstad, Tyra, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Oh, what a great way to frame that. Where did your energy come from? Because that really describes it so well. My journey to coaching was, I think, very similar to a lot of physicians who get here and become coaches themselves. It was because I had a huge need and a brush with burnout. I identified as a approval addict for most of my life, really, and especially accelerated in medical training. So I remember in medical school, I sort of learned how to play the game really well of figuring out what everyone wants you to be and doing that and getting the grade and trying to learn whenever I could. But mostly it was all about other people's opinions of me. And then I'd get that hit of approval with an evaluation or a letter of rec or a grade or whatever it was. And that felt really good. So it really felt like an addiction at that point. And I thought it would get better in residency because the evaluations sort of stopped being so important, but it didn't. And I still found myself seeking praise everywhere and playing the game and trying to be the best, but trying to do it in a way that didn't make me look bad and didn't make me look, cocky or any of that. And I got pretty good at it and somehow in there managed to learn medicine, probably despite all of this. But then when I became an attending, I graduated and essentially all sources of feedback came to a halt. There's a couple here and there. You have whatever supervisor you have, but it wasn't the constant stream that I was used to. And I think I went into withdrawal. I also didn't have my own internal compass at all to tell me how I was doing or if I was okay or good enough. I just had this extremely loud inner critic that was telling me, you shouldn't be here. You just figured out the game. You're probably not actually a good doctor. And at the same time, I had 2 kids pretty quickly right after graduation who were really terrible evaluators of my performance. They just constantly told me I was doing it wrong. They were both very colicky and I felt like a terrible mother. I went to work feeling like a terrible doctor. I felt like I was failing in all of the ways. And I remember that time was so dark. I think it probably was true burnout. I also had some postpartum anxiety and depression, but I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was really dive into it and try and figure it out and try all the things. So I, asked a bunch of people what to do. I tried therapy. I tried a bunch of different SSRIs. I scaled up at work because I had cut back to part-time thinking maybe I'm not cut out for this. That didn't help. So then I scaled up at work. I went back to full-time or even more. That didn't work. And right at that time, I had a friend who was going through coaching certification and she offered me a call for free in return for some feedback. And I rolled my way into that conversation. I still remember it. I was this Western trained medical doctor. At the time I was at the University of Washington, and life coaching sounded like another word for, I don't know, like a cheerleader or something that I certainly didn't need. I hadn't heard of it, but it was a dear friend. So I agreed to the conversation, and more in my brain and my life changed with that one conversation than in all the things I had tried, certainly. And maybe the last decade of my life, it was such an important conversation and managed to shift my thinking with it was one 30-minute call. And so from there, I was totally hooked and hired my own coach for the next couple of years, got my brain sorted out, looked at the evidence. There was at that time, it was 2015, 2016, some mounting evidence around coaching, found there to be some, and felt grateful, but also pretty angry that these skills were not taught to me during medical training. How is it possible that I can list off the entire coagulation cascade, but I cannot tell you how to name and process a feeling? I can't identify grief in my body, and I'm in a field that is faced with grief probably more than any other field. It was wild. And so that was where the energy came. It was that passion. It started off as anger and it turned into I'm going to do this. And that is right when I met Adrienne, who was on an incredible similar parallel path, and we joined forces. And I'll let her tell you her side of the story.
Oh, it's so similar. in so many ways. So Tyra and I actually went to medical school together. And when she speaks about her experience in medical school, so much of that was my experience also, just genuinely feeling like the most important thing is that everybody like me and that I make everybody around me happy. A secondary theme that I notice now, but didn't notice then, was how much I looked outside of me for direction, for somebody to tell me what the next right thing is for me to do, and not really trusting myself to assess or make those types of decisions on my own. So I did really well in medical school, did well in residency, got my dream job straight after my chief year, and pretty quickly was chasing everything at about 100 miles per hour. So I'm trying to become, a big E medical educator. I'm doing academic projects and building curricula. Within a couple of years in my group, I was taking on a leadership role as section chief. And at the same time, also, I had one small kid and was going through IVF and fertility treatments to conceive our second. And I had some complicated pregnancies around that time. And through all of that, the real only coping mechanism I had for dealing with the different stresses that I was experiencing then was eating and overeating specifically, probably drinking more than I should, but not while I was doing fertility treatment, but generally had a not great relationship with food or alcohol or my body. And then after I came back to work after having my second kid, I just really did not recognize myself in any of the roles I was inhabiting. So I didn't believe in myself being able to be a leader of my group who I worked with, because who am I? I'm just a couple years out of training. I don't deserve to be here. Really had a crisis of confidence around my abilities as a leader. I didn't see myself achieving the success I thought I was supposed to have immediately after graduating in my academic pursuits. Being a parent and a partner was the hardest out of all of those jobs. And so I really found myself struggling in those domains as well. And I found a coach who focused on helping women physicians around food and losing weight. And so I came to coaching because some colleagues of mine had transformative experiences in coaching through this woman. So shout out to Katrina Ubel and her program. But through her program, I invested a lot of money in myself. And what I learned is I'm responsible for me, and I'm responsible for what I do, and I'm responsible for how I feel, and I'm responsible for doing the work around those things instead of outsourcing the approval, the validation, the regulation to people outside of me. And so through coaching, I was able to really start what has now been a many years long process of restoring my relationship with myself, understanding myself better as a parent and a partner, and really starting to define for myself what success looks like in work, which wasn't something I thought I was the owner of the definition was. So right around the time Tyra was coming back from the University of Washington, I was thinking, if we could take what I've learned from coaching and package it up in a way that residents could engage with it meaningfully and flexibly and in a way that served them, that should be my job here in academics. I want to take what I've learned through coaching and make it accessible to people without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars themselves, and without having to spend hundreds and hundreds of hours, but to be able to do it in a way that works for them and for free. And so Tyra was coming back, and we both kind of thought, oh my gosh, you're doing what I want to do, and I'm doing what you want to do. And what if we do it together? And so it was almost it was a chemical reaction. It made energy. So you asked, where did the energy come from? And I think the energy came from finding somebody with an experience so similar to my own and goals so similar to my own, and the ability to kind of partner and use that enthusiasm and the skills we built. Both of us became certified as coaches to create something brand new that didn't exist before. And that's Better Together.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication.
As we begin talking about the program, you selected residents as your target population. Say more about that.
Yeah, that was where we started. I think we both identified residency as a really vulnerable and powerful time. It's, in my opinion, where a lot of professional identity is formed. It's where I became myself as a doctor. It's where you finally get to call yourself doctor and figure out how you want to be at work. And then that bleeds over into the rest of your life. It's also a time when some pretty maladaptive habits, I think, really take root. It's like cool to be very busy and overwhelmed and
annoyed even. Like it's cool
it is
to
cool.
develop the like eye roll when the ER calls, or the thinking habits start then and really get ingrained.
Yeah. And it's a time when you objectively really truly have very little autonomy over your life, little control over your schedule. And if you want to finish residency, you're kind of told what to do. And so all the ingredients are present for not only burnout, but really profound moral injury. And I think because of our culture, self-compassion just drains out. It is seen as, useless at best and probably harmful most of the time. And so looking back, I think we both identified residency as this pretty pivotal point in becoming ourselves, and those coping mechanisms just like cementing in a bad way. And so if we could reach them right when that process is happening, perhaps those mechanisms won't cement in our group. And so that's why we started there. And in our early program and in our early studies, we offered Better Together to women residents, those that identified as women in all specialties here at CU. And it was mostly because the outcomes we were hoping to improve, burnout, moral injury, imposter syndrome, are just so much more prevalent in women. And so we decided to just go where the need was worse. That kind of a nice thing to do from a research perspective, and also from an ethical perspective. And so that's sort of how we selected that group We now coach all levels of training and career stages. We have first-year medical students and even retired docs. But I'd say it at its heart started as and still is robustly a program for residents and fellows.
Nice. So let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about what's the structure of the program. What did you put together?
So in its current form, the way Better Together works is we partner with institutions, departments, clinics, schools of medicine, residency programs, whatever an institution group looks like, to bring Better Together to their eligible group. So as Tyra said, now we run programs for medical students, GME trainees, so that's residents and fellows, advanced practice providers, as well as MDDO and research faculty. The program itself is a 4-month opt-in program that folks basically are invited to join, and we run it in the fall and in the spring of every academic year. There's basically 4 different ways that folks can engage in coaching within Better Together, but all of it is optional. All of it is meant to be in service to the participant. And so we have some video modules and worksheets that they can go through on their own, covering things like, what is it feeling and how do you process it? What are your values? Let's do a values inventory and see where those are feeling aligned. We go into growth mindset, feedback, approval addiction, self-compassion, all of these topics over the 16-week program. And folks can kind of join in on that independent work as it works within their schedule. The main thing that we did that was new in Better Together was group coaching. And so the groups that we have all run in parallel. So the medical student, GME, faculty, and APPs. And in those containers, we have group coaching calls where every participant across the country is invited to join in. And so you're in with a group of your peers. It might not be peers at your institution, but peers across the country. And folks are invited to raise their hand and come up and have a coaching conversation with us about anything that's going on. Could be professional things, personal things, life things. And we have that conversation in a group format on Zoom where it's pretty vulnerable. Like they're sharing personal things with an audience of people like them across the country. We'll talk for about 15, 20 minutes, send them back to the audience, and then do it all again about 3 times per hour. We do 2 calls of those per week. Those calls are recorded and put on a private podcast for folks who can't join live. We know folks are busy. We also have a written coaching forum on our website. And finally, and new over the past year or so, is we offer one-on-one coaching with our team of really amazing clinician coaches. So all of our coaches are physicians or advanced practice providers, and every participant can have up to 4 one-on-one coaching calls with one of the members of our team. And again, all of that is available, but not required. And folks kind of pick and choose what way of getting coached works best for them. They can join our fall cohort, our spring cohort, or both over the course of the year partnership with their institution.
It's quite a program. Let me just kind of recap, and there's some
Sure.
questions within that. So one is, so first of all, you're like at all levels of the healthcare professional, physician's life, right? So
Yeah.
medical student to GME to practicing clinicians, and you even said earlier retired clinicians as well. And you're in with a cohort of similarly staged individuals. And then there's the coaching, there's the group coaching, which involves. And by the way, this is virtual is what I'm hearing you say, because there's people from all over the country that are joining this. And there's that component where actual coaching happens between one of you or another facilitator and a volunteer from that group 2 or 3 or 4 times in the hour. And that happens a couple times a week. So that's one part of it. The other is an open kind of forum that's asynchronous is what I understand. So people can anonymously type in their coaching question into this forum and everybody can see, and somebody's monitoring that, one of you or one of the other coaches. I got that. And then there's this asynchronous learning as well, right? So there's, you can learn something about how to identify feelings and some of the other pieces around well-being. And then you also have one-on-one coaching for people who want to do this. That
Great
is
summary.
really comprehensive. That's amazing. So I'm sure some listeners are wondering, the first one where you're group coaching live,
Yeah.
how many people might be in the quote unquote room?
Usually it's between 5 and 30. It kind of depends on the time of day. We have folks from Alaska to Florida. And so we try to set those calls at times that are different. So it kind of depends on the time of day, depends on the population, but usually between 5 and 30 or so participants. The majority of people we find listen to the podcast because everybody's really busy. And so far more people join the call by listening later than are present live.
Please.
It really depends on the group size as well. So it's probably a better representation to say it's somewhere around like 10% of the participants in that group arm get on any individual call. And so we have a lot of residents and fellows and like not as many APPs just because of how we started. And so our resident calls are really big and highly attended. It also sort of depends on the time of year and what's going on for those. But yes, the major way that people take advantage of our program is definitely listening to others get coached, either on a call or on a podcast. Most people are not brave enough to raise their hands and come up. We always say the program works because of the brave minority are really generous and benefiting the very kind of scared minority.
It's a exercise in significant vulnerability. I'm guessing that there's some degree of okayness about it because I'm over here in North Carolina and somebody else is in Alaska. I mean, I'm not going to see them in the hall tomorrow. I wonder if that might lend some degree of success to the program.
Yeah, we noticed that when we transitioned from being just here at the University of Colorado to being a national program, was that you could tell it actually was a little bit more comfortable for people to raise their hands and participate when the pool was bigger. The anonymity, I think, feels a little bit freeing compared to, like you said, like knowing, oh gosh, I'm going to see this person at conference tomorrow. And certainly there are people who might see each other at conference tomorrow, but we're very careful to establish a confidential and psychologically safe space where what we talk about in Better Together stays in Better Together. So folks take that seriously and support each other.
So somebody out in the audience right now is wondering, how do they get to be a participant in your program?
It's really part of our mission and something that we started off with from day one. It's that energy that you talked about, how I was mad that I didn't get these skills. And I think there was, for lack of a better term, a little bit of moral injury. How could a system that really created these maladaptive coping mechanisms not also contribute to helping them? And so we really hold institutions responsible for this work and do not charge individuals. And we contract only with institutions. So the way that this works is that an institution could sign up for Better Together on an annual subscription. So they might pay for a certain group of their people. They get to define that group. So we're pretty flexible in terms of group size. In fact, we even have some that say, you know what, we only have one fellow in this super subspecialized hospital. Can we sign up this one fellow? And we say, yeah, sure, that's your group size, but you still have to tell us the constraints of that group. So it might be an entire department of medicine. Perhaps it's second year medical students. Perhaps it's APPs in the OR. And then they pay a per head rate for everybody in that group. That benefits participants in two ways. One, of course, it's free to them, but two, it's also anonymous to their institution if they use it or not. And so we feed back to the institution de-identified data. Here's how your people are doing before coaching. Here's how they're doing after coaching, which is great because it helps keep us honest and helps tell the institutions that it works. But they don't get to know names of who signs up. It creates a lot of psychological safety that way. There's never any, shame or even vulnerability to your direct supervisors.
Yeah. And we don't do remediation coaching where it's somebody's supervisor says, hey, you need coaching, you're required to participate in this program. Everybody who's in Better Together is there because they're interested and want to be there, which is, I think, critical to the maintenance of the group.
Yep.
Yeah. So an institution may say we had this available in it, and so for one of those say the residents, this is available to you, and you don't have to pay anything, but here it is.
Yeah.
Here's an investment in it.
It's an opt-in, opt-out, or opt-in.
Yep.
Yeah. So you mentioned the sharing the data. So let's talk about what the outcomes are. because you've done some really nice studies of what you're doing all along the way.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned my eye roll moment when I first came into contact with a life coach. And I think that stemmed from, being raised in academia where nothing is true until you have an RCT to prove that it's true, and maybe even more than an RCT. And we knew that we wanted to serve mainly academic clinicians, those that are in a similar atmosphere, those that sort of develop these same problems that we had. And if we were going to reach them, especially with our model of having the institutions support this, we were going to have data to back it up. And so I'll preface this by saying at the very beginning, neither one of us at all identified as a research person. I mean, probably the opposite.
I still don't.
Yeah. I mean, truly me too. It feels like it all happened by accident. I had some failed attempts early in my career to try and do research, and then just quickly labeled myself in a fixed mindset kind of way that I'm not a research person. I'm not going to do it. But the fire was there and the energy was there. So we set out initially, we thought it was 2020 when we were starting. I mean, we wrote the grant for this in 2019, had to pivot to a completely online program. That was the birth of why everything we do is digital, is because it was born in the throes of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And we imagined like a pre-post test to show that our outcomes improve. We knew the outcomes we wanted to look at were burnout, moral injury, self-compassion, and imposter syndrome. And we set out to enroll, we thought, a handful of internal medicine residents, because that's where we were. We offered it through an email that said, hey, do you want to sign up for this thing that we're trying? And here's a pre-post survey. And that first day that we recruited, we got slammed with interest. 50 emails in an hour, overwhelming response.
Wow.
And among them were like, gosh, could you also let my friend who's in emergency medicine in? Or my sister is really struggling in peds. Could you open it up? So there was a moment when we stopped. We modified our IRB and said, let's open this up across specialties. Let's arbitrarily cut ourselves off at 100 because we had no idea how many we could coach at that time. And if we get 100, let's do a randomized control trial. How hard could it be? I mean, it was truly like that first study, I was putting people into a random number generator on Google, and that's how they were randomized. And got some help from, a statistician through the department, thank goodness. Got some great mentorship and ran an RCT. And that was that first pilot study. It showed a 4-point improvement in burnout using the Maslach burnout inventory. For those that are listening that aren't familiar with that, it's sort of the gold standard way to measure burnout. It has those 3 domains: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. And through some fancy statistics, we were able to show, that first of all, we really improved burnout. And actually, our number needed to treat to take someone from burnt out to not burnt out was somewhere around 10. So that was exciting. That was more impactful than we had predicted using, my biostatistician had said, Tyra, in order to even show an improvement in burnout 1 point on the scale, you probably need 500 residents using a power calculation. So we thought, okay, whatever, we'll just do a proof of concept study and then scale up later. But we dropped at 4 points, which shows that it was a powerful intervention compared to a control group. I should mention, of course, we randomized people into receiving this or not receiving this. Those that were randomized to not receive it got coaching after the study was done. So they were a waitlist control. We also improved moral injury and imposter syndrome. So that was super exciting. You could see that was published in JAMA the fall after. It was in 2022, I think September or October. And after that, I remember having a conversation with Adrienne where we were kind of talking about next steps. And she said, what if we enroll another site? Like, what if we enroll someone from the University of Washington? Because that's where I had just come from. I had some connections there. And it was like, oh yeah, why don't we try 3 sites? Like, let's do a national study, get 3 sites. So that was going to be our next step. And over the next couple of months, we somehow networked our way into 26 sites who were interested in doing a large randomized controlled trial. So we offered it to over 1,000 residents and fellows across 26 sites. This time we were powered to find the true difference, and we did. That study is my favorite study of everything we've ever done because it just like blew our pilot out of the water. We improved burnout, moral injury, and imposter syndrome better than we had before. We also showed improvements in self-compassion, in flourishing. I mean, every outcome we looked at improved statistically significantly. So that was the one that was like, here it is. It works. You can't argue with it. Here is the data. And it's so scalable. It's like the whole thing hinges on the group coaching that Adrienne was talking about. And we coach 3 to 4 people in that hour in front of 3 people, or it could be in front of 3,000. And we're still getting that same benefit. It couldn't be more scalable. And I think that's what that second paper really showed.
Yeah, it's really very impressive. That's why I call you guys rock stars at the beginning of this. It's very impressive. And by the way, I just want to remind people those studies, while you have all genders now, those studies were all female.
That's right.
And so my guess is I think Adrienne, you mentioned when we met each other in Nova Scotia for the International Conference on Physician Health that you're now also studying. You're continuing to study with now other than female participants as well.
That's right. You can check out our latest RCT was just published last month in faculty. We ran another pilot here, all genders in faculty physicians, mostly outpatient ambulatory based. It's in the Journal of American Board of Family Medicine.
Oh,
yeah.
My journal.
Your journal.
Yeah.
There.
So can you say something? Was there while we're at that? Are there gender differences?
We weren't powered to find gender differences. In general, it is still, interestingly, women sign up a lot more for coaching programs. Men that do sign up are highly engaged and utilize it a lot more. But just because of numbers, we weren't able to compare the genders. Their baseline scores are about the same in that study. Women are a little bit worse off, but not magnitudes in that attending population.
I think what we're seeing, even just over these couple of years that we've been running the program, it's a new thing, I think, for men to participate in something that is group and vulnerable and talks about tender things. But even just over the couple of years that we've been inclusive of all genders, we're seeing that willingness to participate go up over time. So I don't have any statistics to prove that, but I think that the culture is changing around participation in something like what we're doing.
Well, that reminds me of my next question, which is what are some stories that you've heard from participants that you'd like to share?
I can think of a handful, but there's one woman who's a cardiology fellow here at the University of Colorado who I've partnered with in a couple of different interviews, so I think I'm okay talking about her story. But we hear a lot from people who say, gosh, I didn't know that it was okay for me to make choices that felt right for me until I did your program. Like I thought I had to make the choices that my mentors said I needed to make. And so my life looks really different now because I learned that I could define success for myself through your program. And that just gives me chills to think about because I think I didn't learn that until I was a couple of years, 3-4 years into facultyhood. And so knowing that people are understanding themselves better and have an ability to ask what's right for me and answer that and from within instead of looking outside, it feels like an impact that will ripple and ripple and ripple. This woman, Dr. Saxon, would say, she's a woman in cardiology, and she's saying, I wouldn't be in cardiology if I didn't have the tools I learned in Better Together. And what a contribution she is to her field. She's fantastic. And so I feel very proud.
Yeah, I think another just repeated story over and over again is the story of imposter syndrome and feeling like you're just completely alone in that. So normally we're just siloed with our thoughts. And you probably know individual coaching can be so powerful. And the piece where you normalize somebody's brain as not broken, I always say, I can tell you that you are normal and nothing has gone wrong until I'm blue in the face in a one-on-one coaching call. But until you hear it repeated over and over again, with people that are your peers and people that you admire, it doesn't really land. And so the group format provides this awesome forum where, like, we had a call where I would coach a neurology intern on whatever imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate thoughts that they were having. And then the very next call would be a neurosurgery chief resident with the exact same core thought. I mean, to the T, the same thought just being repeated in this person who's 10, 12 years ahead of them in training. And then this would probably be a model for that kind of normalization. You really can only get with group coaching and with having access to these recorded podcasts. And so I think those stories are the most impactful and probably responsible for the impact that we're having in the data. They get to keep their podcasts. They're private, but they get to keep them and listen to them over and over again. And I think that power is huge.
As I was reading your paper, I was recounting my own struggles with imposter syndrome. I mean, who doesn't have that at some point? And I'm thinking exactly what you just said, having that validated by people that you admire, respect, just by virtue of the program that they're in, you may not even know them, that says I struggle with the same thing, is way different than the responses I got when I was a resident, which was, you're fine, don't worry about it. You're fine. Like,
right.
Yeah, but I don't feel fine. And I don't, yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Do you have a sense, either from your research or from the participants, which of those has been the most impactful?
That's like the $1 million question.
Okay.
We have guesses at it.
We do.
I honestly think it depends from person to person. I think there are people who want a workbook and who want to be like, and who will get a lot and transform their relationship with themselves doing reflective writing and inquiry. And I think that my suspicion is people like a little bit of the voyeuristic component of listening to other people. And I think that's probably where the majority of the impact comes from, is listening, recognizing that you're not alone, seeing yourself in someone else's struggle is like, that's empathy, right? And so I think when people see, oh gosh, I can have empathy for that person going through something, and over the months see, gosh, if I can have empathy for them, then maybe I can have empathy for myself. Like maybe I can offer the same to myself. I think that's the switch.
Yeah, we don't directly measure engagement because we don't want there to be ever any, attendance or marker that they feel they're being judged on. So that's an intentional choice. We do indirectly measure engagement. We can see how many times modules are accessed or how many clicks we get on this certain part of the website. And what we know is that the engagement for each one individual section is not overwhelming. It's somewhere between like 15 and 20% of people use written coaching. 15 to 20% of people use group calls. 15 to 20% of people watch our, asynchronous curriculum. Something like 92 to 95% of people are listening to those downloaded podcasts. Our podcasts, where you may listen to your peers get coached, are really, just like Adrienne mentioned, I think they're the engine behind all of the impact. I think that's so important.
I'm not minimizing this at all, but I wonder if institutions saying, we have this available to you, we think it's important, and we want this to be present and available. And even if you only access one part of that one time, that all by itself has an impact. And I know I'm not minimizing the really strong work that you just mentioned, but I do wonder about that as well.
Absolutely. I think that's totally right. There are people that do nothing. We have looked on the back end. There are people that do nothing except like maybe read our emails, and their scores improve just by being in it. So I totally agree.
Yeah. Neat.
We like to think it's that one conversation we had that like moved the thing. And I think for many people it is. I think it's a minority of people who raise their hand or who have that one-on-one conversation either with our coaches or with us on the group calls. But the vast majority are able to shift their thinking about meaningful and sometimes painful parts of their work and their life just through listening.
My reflection right now is that this is me talking, but I'm noticing, my thinking is that what you are bringing to the world is a program which reduces distress the distresses of medical training and just being a medical healthcare professional, and therefore reducing maladaptive approaches, but also reducing mental health challenges and depression, anxiety. All of this towards improving healthcare professionals' outcomes so that they're better able to do what they do, which all involves better care for patients.
That's right.
I don't know if you're thinking about it that way, but it sure, I can draw the lines.
Oh, yeah. And the research, I think, is out there to support that. I mean, all types of patient outcomes improve when you have not burnt out docs. And outcomes for the docs themselves staying in their practice and, not scaling down their time or not leaving the practice, not killing themselves and not hurting themselves in other ways. And so I think it's an easy line to draw, and putting patient care at the center of it is natural for us.
Yeah. What is next for you too, and for Better Together?
We have so many ideas. I have to say, like, both Tyra and I think are like 90% clinical. So the majority of our work still is as primarily clinicians. And so we have so many ideas of how we would take Better Together if we were able to devote all of our time to it. We have ideas about creating kind of a 2.0 for folks who've been through Better Together once or twice and who want to apply advanced coaching topics or do kind of like deeper dives into what's working for them or what's not, focus on leadership, relationships, things like that. And we also are starting to explore how we can expand our coaching team to be more inclusive of coaches with different trainings than what our coaches currently have. So I think for me, operationally, what we're doing with Better Together, our growth is in those two directions, expanding our content and also our coach team.
Yeah, and I think research-wise, we've now completed 5 randomized clinical trials. We've done 1 in each of our arms and 2 in residents and fellows that are all have positive findings. And so I think we're done proving it.
Yes.
And now I'm really interested in understanding why and getting kind of behind the theory. So probably more qualitative work. We've done a little bit of qualitative work, but a deeper dive into what's actually going on. Can we look at social emotional theories that support what we're doing? Self-determination theory is a new passion of mine that I think is underpinning all of the coaching that we do. And so I'm on a mission to look into that and understand it in a much deeper way, because I think it will help the program. I think it will help the coaches. I think we can use it to help the participants. I'll just echo what Adrienne said in the fact that we are both, full-time clinicians here at the University of Colorado. And I want to make sure that we say it at least once. Better Together is not a business. It is not. It doesn't make us money. It's simply a program that's offered under the University of Colorado, a nonprofit, academic institution. For anybody listening out there that wants to talk to their institutions about signing up for this, a helpful nugget is that this isn't a for-profit business. This isn't some LLC. This is partnering with the University of Colorado and a curricular program that they offer.
Yeah, I just have to say that given what we've been talking about for the last several minutes, the amount of work that you put in, the energy that you brought to that work, hearing that you both are full-time outside of this is not only amazing, but also makes me worry just a little bit about, recreating some of the challenges that got you here in the first place.
You think?
We have these conversations. We just had one before we got on this call. I mean, I think I have to speak to the testament of what partnership has looked like with Tyra. And I think a lot of what feels hard, both in residency and early career, where both of us were experiencing a lot of these challenges, is feeling like you had to do all of it and do it all alone. And so part of what keeps the energy in the bank is having a partner who is invested and who picks up when I'm not at 100% and where I pick up if she's not. And so we couldn't have built any of this stuff individually. So I have to say to people out there, your people are there, be in partnership with people who care about the things that you're also doing, because that's the only way this works.
Before we close, I'd just like to ask all my guests, is there anything that you wish to impart to the listening audience that I have not asked you about?
I mean, mine goes back to not identifying as a research person and how really my identity had to change in order to do what you just said was a massive amount of work. I don't think any of this could have happened without us getting coaching first and continuously through the process, because this was, it was logistically hard, but it was much more of an emotional, just tidal wave that we have had to go through. And I don't think we could have done it without coaching. And so you could apply that to any identity shift that you're looking towards. If you want to become a bench researcher, or if you want to become a medical educator and you haven't, or if you want to do something totally outside of medicine, having coaching in your tool belt to help you shift your identity, I think is step number one. And through 100, could not have done it without Adrienne and having that coaching tool. So truly, you should go look at my early stuff prior to 2015. I was not a researcher. If I can do it, I promise it's possible. Come join us.
My inner imposter says, at least you had early stuff. The thing I'm repeatedly learning that I'll share is that there is no right way. And the places where I am often growing is the places where I think I know what's right. And then I'm reminded that there's no right there, and that my job is to try again and try differently and continue to grow, because there's no right way. So if you're out there and you're thinking, I've got to figure out the right way to do this, there might be 2 or 3 or infinity ways that you could try.
Yeah, absolutely. I am struck with a thought, and the thought is that the listeners to this program have a glimpse into what Better Together is about. And what I heard about one of the strengths is hearing other people's stories. And so while listeners won't be in Better Together necessarily, some hopefully will be, they are going to benefit from the stories that you just shared about yourselves. And so for that, I really thank you very much for that vulnerability. I thank you for creating the program, taking your energy and creating the program. As somebody who's increasingly more of a consumer of healthcare than providing, I really appreciate your contribution to the future of the healthcare providers of this country. So with that, I thank you once again, Dr. Adrian Mann and Dr. Tyra Fainstad. Thank you for being on Life Changing Moments.
Gosh, thank you so
Dan.
much.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Changing Moments. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate us 5 stars and leave a review. Doing so helps our podcast reach more listeners. Have something to share? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Visit the MD Coaches community on Facebook groups. This dynamic virtual space is a place to continue discussion about life-changing moments and perhaps share some life-changing moments of your own. Join the conversation today.